On impasse. So, sometimes referred to as deadlock. Impasse defined. Impasse occurs when the two sides negotiating an agreement are unable to reach an agreement and become deadlocked with no forward progress. So, an impasse is almost invariably mutually harmful, either as a result of direct action which may be taken, such as a union strike, in an employment negotiation, or an impasse can result in military sanctions or action in international relations, or simply due to the resulting delay in negotiating a mutually beneficial agreement. So the higher you go on the stakes of the negotiation, impasse can sometimes have a very negative effect.
Divorce also could be.
A divorce?
Yeah.
Divorce is a resolution.
No.
No, you're right. You know, actually you're right. Because if you have an impasse during the divorce negotiation, yeah, the two parties involved may have had a fairly good relationship in the beginning of the divorce. By the end of the divorce, now they really hate each other.
Yeah.
Which I think that's the fault of the lawyers frequently, though.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a good point. That's a very good example of divorce. I like that. I like that. And I know, because I've been there twice already, so I can vouch for that. My first one was a misery.
Really?
Took everything. Got everything. House, cars, even my underwear. If I tell you I walked away with the clothes on my back, that's all I walked away with. Literally. Okay. Yeah, that was a nasty one. So yeah, that was an impasse. No, I didn't have to manage. I couldn't manage the impasse. So the nature of impasse. Impasse is not necessarily bad or destructive, unless it's a divorce. There are numerous reasons negotiations can be an impasse. Some are good reasons that parties stay in impasse until a viable resolution is reached. Very rarely, though, in my opinion. Impasse does not have to be permanent. So if the context, content, process, or people are altered, the negotiation can move out of impasse and finally move into resolution. But that doesn't always happen. Okay? These are kind of overly positive. Impasse can also be tactical or genuine. So you may create an impasse during negotiation tactically to get the other party to give in on concessions. Okay? So parties may use impasse for tactical advantage. Genuine impasse is used to reduce concessions pending resolution. So it's sometimes a tactic as well. This you should know for your exam question. What are the causes of impasse? So, divisiveness, intensity, pervasiveness, and complexity. Divisiveness, the degree to which the conflict divides people so they are backed into a corner without any underwear. Intensity, the level of participant involvement, emotionality, and commitment in a conflict. And they can get quite emotional. Pervasiveness, the degree to which conflict invades the social and private lives of people. Divorce does that. Before you know it, your children are drawing up, favorites. Your in-laws hate you. Sometimes even your direct relatives hate you. Okay? Pervasiveness. Complexity, the number and complexity of issues. The number of parties involved. The level of social systems involved, and the degree of difficulty in resolving issues. So impasse, the longer impasse lasts, the more complex it can become. Particularly if you have impasse between countries. Sometimes it gets worse and worse and worse until the bombs start falling.
Like Iran and
And anybody. Like Iran and anybody. Increasing the likelihood of impasse. So, the atmosphere is charged with anger, frustration, and resentment. Channels of communication are closed or constrained. Original issues at stake have now become blurred and ill-defined. Parties tend to perceive great differences in their respective positions. So both parties they take a position and they stick on it. They won't move. As anger and tension increase, parties become locked in their initial positions, and that's usually what happens. So the only way around it is to keep the parties talking. That's critical, okay? Those on the same side will view each other favorably, naturally. So, fundamental mistakes that cause impasse: neglecting the other side's problem. Too much of focus on price can cause impasse. Positions over interest. Sometimes people stick with their position rather than considering each other's interests. If you focus on each other's positions, you've got impasse. If you look at each other's interests that drive those positions, then you can move forward. Does that make sense? Very important piece of negotiation is not to focus on position, focus on interests. Because it's the interests that drive the positions. Too much focus on common ground. Neglecting to have a BATNA can result in an impasse. Adjusting perceptions during the negotiations, or your perceptions keep being adjusted through the negotiation, eventually you can wind up in impasse.
What is BATNA?
BATNA. Who's asking that? Were you sleeping this morning? What's BATNA? Say it for, tell him. Has nothing to do with it. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Sometimes we refer to as Plan B. If Plan A doesn't work, you should always have a Plan B, kind of an exit strategy. Okay? Make sense? Where were you this morning? Oh, you're having a cigarette. Oh, is that the finance guy? Oh, always the finance. Oh, that's the finance guy. He doesn't know it either. See?
So,
Yeah. Huh? Oh, you're a pharmacist. Oh, okay.
but he is smoking as well.
But he was smoking.
So smoking is harmful.
Pharmacists should never smoke. They must know the dangers of smoking.
Yeah, yeah.
So, this also relates to your question. How do you resolve it? Cognitive resolution, emotional resolution, or behavioral. So cognitive, change how the parties view the situation. Try to change the views, okay? Emotional, change how the parties feel about the deadlock, all right? And behavioral is specify ways the parties can stop difficult conflict dynamics. Normally here you bring in someone called a mediator to get the parties talking, okay? Everybody got that? Very simple. Some strategies for resolving impasse. Now, if you want more explanation, in the original slides that you will get or have already, this goes into a bit more detail. So, some strategies: reach an agreement on the rules and procedures. In other words, before you start negotiations, you should discuss what are we going to do if we get into an impasse. Now, normally, that's where you decide, well, we'll bring in a mediator. It's good to know that in advance before you start negotiations. Don't wait till you're there. Also, reduce tension and synchronize de-escalation of hostility. Improve the accuracy of your communication processes. You also want to control the number and the size of issues. If you have too many, it's easier to fall into impasse. Find out what you share on common ground initiatives. What do you have in common? Put more emphasis on what you have in common rather than what you have in differences. Okay? And then enhance the desirability of options and alternatives. The more alternatives and options you generate, the less likely you are to fall into impasse. Okay? Everybody got it? Whew. What time? Wow. You ready for the exam stuff? Yeah, but I'm not going to give you the questions. I'm going to give you all the topics. I can't give it to you by question. They will not allow me to do that anymore. Huh? No can do. And you know why they won't let me do it? Because people in some classes started complaining to other teachers that, gee, Professor Gardner gives us the question and what we need to study for each question. And they made a big issue out of it. They made a big issue out of it, and then they tell you can't do that anymore. What? I've given my ethical word I wouldn't do it anymore. But
We can bargain.
what I can.
What happens in Kuwait stays in Kuwait.
I thought that was Las Vegas. I have it or somewhere. Here it is. So. Okay, here we go. You have 2 slides. Now you can take a picture.